Adams Morgan's been nothing but amazing, and I mean, we almost didn't open here because we couldn't find us. You know, at the time when we were looking in late '02, there was nothing available. There was no rentals. Everything was basically down here. It was at the peak of occupancy when it came to all these people that own these buildings. Like, it was just jammed full of bars. There was, whether it was some kind of store or boutique or restaurant or a little small pop-up type restaurant, like everything, there was nothing for rent. Saturday morning, I went and got the post, and I saw a thing said Adams Morgan. I called, made an appointment to meet the gentleman on a Monday morning. I met him at like 9 o'clock in the morning, and by 1 o'clock we had signed the lease.
The neighborhood has kind of has a history of being quite progressive, and there's been a lot of artists and a lot of really creative people that have, grown up here or come here and done, kind of made their life's work.
Here it's always been edgy. We have from the outset been a place of opportunity, so we've always invited artists to present stuff that they really didn't think they could present somewhere else. So whether that was AIDS activism, whether it was gay and lesbian activism, whether that has been medical activism, racial activism, gender activism now, that's always been what's been going on at DCAC. Sometimes even people working for a certain aesthetic are still working in maybe in materials or using themes that are still edgy.
Most of those places up and down 18th Street were row houses, and they were used as row houses. The nightlife, I guess, came when real estate developers realized they could turn those places into restaurants, and then Spaghetti Garden came in the early 80s. Now it's Pictures, I think. So really in the early 80s it started. I suppose it got bigger and bigger into the 90s and 2000. And since all the other neighborhoods have become gentrified, Adams Morgan has lost a little bit of its popularity. They're going H Street and the Wharf and other places. It was more communal and way more active. I mean, towards the 80s we knew gentrification was coming, so there was a lot of community demonstrations and protests at buildings. You don't see any of that anymore. I live in a building that has a history, this is before I even came here, had a history of housing artists, because the spaces are pretty big, and some of the artists had big canvases or big sculptures. So yeah, it has had a lot of artists. A lot of stuff to photograph, always in Adams Morgan. So, and I'm kind of a socially aware photographer. So I did a lot of homelessness, especially in the 80s. In the early 80s, there was a thing called the Mariel Boat Lift that Castro opened a lot of his prisons and insane asylums, and he put people on boats, and they all came to the United States, and a lot of them landed up on Columbia Road. Yeah, a lot of that was like right in front of my window, and I speak Spanish, so I go out and talk to them. And I went to, in the early 80s, there were a lot of vacant buildings in Adams Morgan. So I had a boyfriend. I made him take me into all the vacant buildings so I could photograph inside and see who was living inside. But I've always been like curious.
In the 90s, there gets to be a lot of bars, and that's when we get a moratorium on liquor licenses. And so it started out little by little getting those, and then that kind of peaked when there was violence. There were stabbings and fights, And the neighborhood really just didn't care for that. So that began to change over to some of the retail that you see now. And then for a while, we got a real insurgence of retail.
The original owner opened Smash in Georgetown in 1984. And then he had it there till 2006. I was just one of his employees near the tail end. And then when he decided he was gonna quit, just stop it, some of the people that worked there just asked if we could keep it going. And he said, yeah. And I became the owner. He essentially just gave me the business. And so we just kind of nestled right in, and people have been supportive. So we've been able to make it work through all these years. I only want to say good things about it because it's allowed me to be in business. Like, I think there are many neighborhoods where I don't think this plan would work.
Having this very unusual concept and having like the skate shop and vegan, vegetarian and Russian, Ukrainian cuisine, and also a coffee shop, an art gallery. It's kind of like all those things are impossible together when you talk about it. But I feel like Adams Morgan is that rebel type of area where things are accepted the way they are. And I feel kind of welcome, and I feel like I'm in a community of people who are rebels and pushers, and that's why I felt like it's a perfect place for me. I spent several years in California and San Francisco area, and I love Haight-Ashbury and the whole like hippie culture and arts. I also traveled, and I've been to Berlin and Amsterdam, and that whole Adams Morgan is kind of brings everything together. It's kind of hippie, it has the Victorian architecture that is similar to San Francisco. It has lots of tourists, it has lots of rebels, it has that Woodstock feel.
I think, embracing new ideas is a big part of that, and not saying no to stuff that's different or unusual, and keeping an open mind. I think those are all important things, and we need the city's help to do that, to be creative, for DCRA and for DDOT to not immediately say no when someone comes up with some interesting new creative idea.
You look around Adams Morgan, there's no real box stores, there's no big business, and the neighborhood's kept it that way for a long time. I mean, other than having like the Safeway and the McDonald's and stuff, there's nothing else.
Part of the appeal of the neighborhood is that it's a whole bunch of small businesses, and so we do want to kind of stick together. There's more of a kinship, I feel, with the business owners up and down the street. If it was just a bunch of cookie cutter businesses that are everywhere, they're all in the burbs, this neighborhood would suffer because of that.